Hi, I'm Anat David from the Open University of Israel. I'm sorry that I can't see you in person this time, so this will be a recorded contribution. And my contribution to this session about digital research methods and tools is to propose a method for archiving the web in retrospect. Retrospective web archiving may be useful for both librarians and researchers. It may be used to fill in existing gaps in web archives. For example, if a major event, such as the one we're experiencing these days with the coronavirus, has not been archived in real time. At the same time, it may also be used as a critical tool for asking what informs web archives, and to think of new ways of informing web archives, ways that take into account global cultural practices of information sharing on the web across different platforms. I only have 10 minutes, and the methodological pipeline is rather complicated, but very much doable. So what I'll try to do now is to introduce the principles of the method. If you're interested in the technical details, please refer to the full article which was published in Internet Histories last year. Essentially, the pipeline proposes to begin with an authoritative source from which keywords can be automatically derived, and use them as a unified query list for information retrieval from various platforms. In the case study that I'll present below, we use the names of Wikipedia entries of an event in all available languages of this entry in Wikipedia. URLs retrieved from social media often appear in shortened form, which is both a problem for preservation as well as for curation. The second step then involves unshortening the URLs. Thirdly, the publication date of the retrieved URLs has to be carbon dated in order to confirm that the retrieved URLs have indeed been published in the retrospective period. For this, we use Carbondate API, which was developed by the Web Science and Digital Libraries Lab at the Old Dominion University. We also perform link route evaluation in order to determine the extent to which the retrieved URLs survive the test of time. And finally, we batch archive the retrospective URLs. Depending on whether you're a researcher or an archiving institution, this can be in form of a special collection or simply batch archiving the retrospective URLs that survive link route to the Wayback Machine. This may sound a bit dry and technical, so I'll try to illustrate both the necessity of retrospective web archiving and the details of the method with a case study. In this article, I built a retrospective archive of the 2014 war in Gaza, 4 years after the event had ended. In the summer of 2014, Israel and Hamas were engaged in a violent conflict officially dubbed by the Israeli military as Operation Protective Edge, but widely acknowledged as the 2014 war in Gaza. During the 50 days of the operation, the IDF carried out more than 6,000 airstrikes alongside a massive ground operation which took place between July 17 and August 5. About 70% of Gaza's population evacuated their homes during the attacks. Hundreds were killed and thousands injured. Hamas, for its part, launched thousands of rocket attacks on Israeli cities, causing injuries, casualties, and distress among Israeli civilians. Imagine the web that year during the war. Millions of users from around the world were debating it on social media. The Israeli military and Hamas also used social media to engage in information warfare. News websites were reporting the events, pushing breaking news alerts around the clock, and on Wikipedia, editing wars were taking place on how to properly name and document the unfolding event. These abundant and dynamic communication traces provide important documentation of a significant event, both for the Palestinians and Israelis and internationally, but they are not part of the archived web. During that time, web archivists and web archiving crawlers at the Internet Archive and at national libraries around the world were performing their routine harvests of websites based on their regular settings. Unintentionally, they may have captured some of the URLs that were published during the war, if these fell under the crawler settings, or if users actively saved them to the Wayback Machine. But the majority of online activity related to the war, especially that which took place on social media platforms outside the realm of web archiving crawlers, was not archived. 4 years after the war in Gaza. Can its web presence still be preserved? We use Wikipedia as the authoritative source for building the cross-platform and cross-national collection, and scrape the URLs from the Wikipedia pages describing the war in 49 languages. We also use the names of the Wikipedia pages in 49 languages as keywords, and subsequently queried and scraped further data and URLs from Twitter, YouTube, Google, and Google Search. After completing the pipeline described above, the results are a retrospective archive comprised of about 120,000 unique URLs, URIs I should mention, and relevant metadata, carbon dated to the period of the military operation in 49 languages and about 6,000 domain suffixes. The Israeli domain harvest, which was performed for the National Library of Israel by the Internet Archive, contained less than 1% of the URLs we collected in the retrospective collection. Interestingly, we found significant cultural differences in URL sharing practices across platforms. While there are relatively few references in Arabic in Wikipedia and YouTube, Arabic language speakers mostly took to Twitter to discuss the issue and report the events. By contrast, URL in Hebrew are mostly published by media outlets, which explains the relative high proportion on Google and YouTube. We also found that some platforms are more prone to link rot than others, especially due to the URL shortening services play in facilitating link sharing on social media. I argue that these cultural and platform differences are crucial for informing and thinking about web archives. To date, the majority of web archiving institutions use web crawlers as a technique to perform large-scale, real-time web archiving of the web, in the case of the Internet Archive, or of national webs if national libraries are concerned. Yet web crawling captures URLs indistinctively. It is a practice blind to the rich cultural and temporal dynamics that characterize the web, and is poor in contextual metadata. In most cases, it is unable to cross the walled gardens of social media platforms. Milligan and Bouet suggest distinguishing between gatekeeping and bottom-up approaches to web archiving curation. In line with this distinction, web archiving institutions must first attempt to understand these cultural and platform differences before deciding on how, when, or where to archive the web. A cross-cultural and cross-platform approach to web archiving also requires that web archiving explore beyond comfort zones. The standard practice of thinking about web archiving from a national perspective might be a curatorial and institutional solution that stands in stark contrast to the global and network structure of the open web. Put differently, if we remain too comfortable trusting our matured standards and practices, we may fail to notice that the ship has sailed. Having said that, web archiving in retrospect is also proposed as a way to redress the situation. It can be used by archiving institutions to correct archival divides or to build inexpensive special collections after the fact. It may also be used by citizens, researchers, and activists to counter hegemonic narratives which are deliberately or arbitrarily contrasted by existing web archives. So I hope retrospective web archiving is something that can be further explored in this network, and I look forward to collaborating with you on these questions. Thank you.